The Green Line extension started as a much smaller project, and now it's closing in on $3 billion. But the bigger surprise is that real estate along the route is already moving before the line even opens. So today, I'm breaking down how Minneapolis' light rail is changing everything and what this could mean for buyers, sellers, and investors. I've been in this market for over 8 years, and my team and I have closed over 1,000 homes. And some of these suburbs may look different by the time everyone else catches on. You can drive through Hopkins right now and see light rail trains running on the new tracks. They're already testing them, even though passengers aren't riding yet. So this thing is pretty far along at this point. The Green Line extension is adding about 14 miles of light rail from downtown Minneapolis all the way through St. Louis Park and Hopkins, then through Minnetonka and out to Eden Prairie. So if you live in one of those West Metro suburbs, you're gonna have a light rail that takes you straight downtown, which you've never had before. And it's a pretty big project. You're talking about 16 new stations, 29 new bridges, and 2 major tunnels. They've also had to build walls to hold back the ground, add places for people to cross the tracks, and even move freight train tracks to make room for the new line. Over 85% of the main construction is done, which is why they're already out there testing trains. I live in Maple Grove up in the northwest suburbs, and we don't have a light rail anywhere near us. We do have a bus station though, and people take those buses into downtown for work and then back home. It makes sense because driving downtown does stink. Then you have to figure out where to park, and you get to pay for parking on top of that. I think there are gonna be a lot of people in the West Metro who use the light rail for the same reason. Right now, if you live farther out west and you want to get downtown, you're pretty much driving or taking the bus. So having another option is really exciting. You can get on the train out there and take it straight downtown for work, a game at Target Field, or whatever else you're doing. This is going to be a big deal for people living in those West Metro suburbs. The problem is getting this thing built has taken years, and it's cost way more than they originally planned. That's where a lot of the frustration with this project has come from. Now, if you're thinking about moving to St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Minnetonka, or Eden Prairie, or if you already own a home in one of those areas and you're curious what it's worth, you can get a free home valuation tool using the link in the description or the QR code on the screen. All right, back to the video. Getting this project built has taken way longer and cost way more than they originally planned. Early on, the project was expected to cost around $1.25 billion, and it was supposed to open in 2023. Well, obviously that didn't happen. The opening date got pushed all the way to 2027, and the budget now is close to $3 billion. Hennepin County and the Metropolitan Council also had to put in more money to cover those higher costs and keep the project moving. A big part of the problem was the Kenilworth Tunnel in Minneapolis. They were trying to build underground in a pretty tight area between 2 lakes, and the ground ended up being harder to build in than they expected. Then they found old debris underground, and they also had freight train tracks in the same area that had to be moved to make room for the light rail. That's why this has been so frustrating for people here. You've been driving past this construction for years, the opening keeps getting pushed back, and the cost keeps going up. People were just wondering when this thing was ever going to be done. But at this point, the tunnel is finished and the tracks are laid across the full line. They're already testing trains too. So after all the delays and all the money that's gone into this thing, it is finally getting pretty close. And later, I'll show you how this line could help people who don't even live in one of the suburbs it runs through. The reach goes farther than you might expect. Now, while the trains aren't carrying passengers yet, there's already a ton of development happening around the new stations in both Hopkins and Minnetonka. The development around this line is already happening. More than $3 billion in real estate development has already been built, is under construction, or has been approved along the route. And the trains aren't even carrying passengers yet. And St. Louis Park is a big part of that. More than 1,000 homes have been completed, proposed, or are under construction near its 3 new stations. Right next to the Beltline Boulevard station, there's a project adding 380 apartments, a lot of space, of ground retail, and a huge parking structure. And that project is expected to finish right around the time the light rail opens. The Opus area in Minnetonka has around 1,700 apartments and other multifamily homes approved within about a half mile of the new stations. You already have a major job center there, and now you're adding light rail that can take people straight into downtown Minneapolis. So it makes sense that developers are building near those stations. Minnetonka is already a pretty desirable suburb, and the light rail gives people another way to get downtown. Hopkins has been changing quite a bit too, and I think that's a really cool area. Downtown Park and Hopkins has become this walkable little area where you can go out to eat or grab a drink and walk around Main Street. It's getting 3 stations, and home values have gone from around the low 260s in 2018 to somewhere in the mid to high 300s more recently. You can still find homes around that price, but closer to the Minnetonka border, some of the more expensive properties are going somewhere in the mid 600s up into the low 1 millions. So there's a pretty big price range depending on where you are and what kind of home you're buying. And you already have new development going up around the stations. And if you're thinking about buying near one of these stations, in a minute I'll tell you exactly where I would be looking and how close to the train I would want to be. I've seen people talk about both sides of the coin with this. You have people who think the light rail will help because more people can move into these areas and commute downtown. Then you have the naysayers who worry that bringing the light rail farther into the suburbs could also bring some of the problems people already have concerns about around light rail areas. We have to be real about that. There probably could be pros and cons to this, and we won't know exactly how it affects these areas until the line is open and people are using it. But the impact of this line goes farther than the development happening around Hopkins and Minnetonka. As you keep going west, it starts connecting more of the Southwest Metro to downtown. Eden Prairie is getting 4 stations of its own, so people living there are going to get that same easier connection to downtown we talked about earlier. But Eden Prairie adds something else because you also have the Golden Triangle out there, which is a major job area near the interchange of highways 169 and 212. You have tens of thousands of people working in that area, and now those jobs are going to be connected to downtown by light rail. So someone living downtown or somewhere else along the line could take the train out to Eden Prairie for work too. It goes both ways. And there's another area I would watch longer term. Around the town center station, there's an area planned for more of a walkable mixed-use development. It's still a long-term plan, but that's a pretty big area. So if you're buying Eden Prairie, I would want to know where that development is planned and how close the home is to it. Then at the end of the line, you have Southwest Station. You already have buses running out of there, and now the light rail is going to connect with those routes too. There's also a service called Southwest Prime where you can request a ride in places like Victoria and Chanhassen along with Chaska and Carter. So you don't necessarily have to live right next to one of these stations to use the light rail. If you live farther out, you could drive to a park and ride, take a bus, or use that ride service to get to Southwest Station. That gives people in some of those towns beyond the actual line another way to connect to it. That can also be a pretty good setup for someone moving here from out of state. You can live farther out, have more space, and be closer to the outdoors while still being able to connect to the light rail from one of these towns. And I think that combination is what makes Eden Prairie and some of those towns farther west a little different from the areas we had just talked about. Hopkins and Minnetonka are seeing development right around the stations. Out there, you also have a major job area and people coming in from towns even farther west. So if you're looking at where to buy around this line, there are some areas that make more sense than others. So with all of that development happening around the line, if you're looking at this as a buyer or an investor, I think the biggest thing is where you're buying in relation to the station. And we already have a local example of this. We saw that with the existing green line between Minneapolis and St. Paul, homes within about a quarter mile of the station gained value compared with similar homes farther away. Some of that started when funding was confirmed, and the difference grew after the trains started running. So if you care about your home going up in value over time, I would probably look within about a 10-minute walk of one of those new stations. I would still look at Hopkins and St. Louis Park, but I wouldn't spend a ton of time going over those again because we already talked about what's happening there. Those areas can also make sense if you're looking at a rental. Renters and young professionals may want to be close enough to walk to the train, especially if they work downtown or somewhere else along the line. Whether you're buying for yourself or looking at a rental, I'd pay the most attention to the neighborhoods where the train is easy to use in everyday life. And if those areas are outside your budget, I would also look at Golden Valley and Crystal. They're not on this green line extension, so I want to be clear about that. They're along a different rail project heading northwest out of downtown, but that project is still at an earlier stage. They're still working on the federal funding, and construction isn't expected to begin until 2027, with trains not running until the early 2030s. So you may be able to get in there at a lower price if all of this has you thinking about buying or selling, or you just want to know what your home could be worth with all this development happening nearby. grab the free home valuation in the description. It doesn't cost you anything, and it gives you some real numbers to look at instead of just guessing. A lot of people are gonna wait until the trains are running before they start looking at homes near these stations. But the numbers in some of these areas are already changing, and by then, some of the better opportunities may already be gone. If you wanna know the specific streets and the price points I would be looking at before this line opens in 2027, just email me today. I can show you where I would be looking and what I would be paying attention to before you buy. And if you think the light rail is a big project, they're also putting nearly $2 billion into the airport. Watch the video I linked to see what that could mean for the suburbs around. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.